Did you know that golf drivers used to look like this? That golfers used to wear things like this? Much has changed since golf was invented 800 years ago. But how did we get here? In this video we'll go over every aspect of golf and talk about how they've evolved over the last 800 years. Some of these stories are heartbreaking, shocking, and just downright confusing. We'll start with the sport's inception and the golfing organisations that have brought golf to where it is today. It all started in the 12th century, when David I of Scotland began setting aside large landscapes for public use for the game of golf, although at the time, very few could afford to play. The luxury of having the time available and the money to buy equipment stays true even to this day. In 1457, the game was oddly banned, as England at the time was more interested in pushing people towards sports like archery, as it lent itself more helpfully to military training. But thankfully, in 1502, the sport was saved and unbanned by James V. The game began to increase in popularity, especially amongst the royals, most notably Mary, Queen of Scots, who is known to this day as the first female golfer. It was in fact Mary who coined the term caddie, which references the French military cadets who assisted her while she played. But it wasn't until 1774 that the game became more official. The Company of Edinburgh Golfers established the first golf society in the world and laid out the first 13 official rules of the game. Just 10 years later, now one of the world's most renowned golf clubs, St Andrews, was born. In the early 1880s, not many folks played golf, but things changed really fast. By 1886, the number of courses had doubled. Then by 1898, there were a whopping 1,460 clubs. As golf became more popular, a whole new industry emerged. Instead of just individual professions in the form of ball makers, club makers, course keepers, a new kind of expert rose to the top: the golf professional. Before World War I, golf clubs would employ professional golfers and pay them a salary to play and represent their course, rarely more than £1 a week. But they weren't just allowed to play golf as we know them today. They also had to run the shop, make and repair clubs, sell balls, and coach new members upon demand. In this period, professional golf wasn't about players winning money. It was more about matches set up by wealthy amateurs who wanted to bet on the outcome. But as the century went on, things changed. Tournaments became more common, giving players a chance to earn money and show off their skills. Winning big tournaments like the Open Championship could lead to invitations for exhibition matches, tours abroad, and even job offers. Before the first PGA organised tournament in 1901, pros had about 13 events a year, with prize money of around £55 each. That's a millionth of the prize pool offered by some of the tournaments today. By 1914, there were 31 tournaments with an average prize of £90, thanks to the efforts of the PGA, which found sponsors and organised events at different levels. Besides the main tournaments where top players competed, many local and district competitions emerged during this time. More tournaments gave professional players more chances to gain recognition and earn money. This shift was mainly thanks to the establishment of the PGA. In 1920, a record-breaking prize pool was announced, sponsored by the Glasgow Herald newspaper, for £650. But only a year later, this record was then broken by a tournament held at the St Andrews Golf Club for £1,050, a staggering figure at the time that is the equivalent of £60,000 today, and one that began to attract players globally rather than just nationally. It would be in this same year that the earliest form of the Ryder Cup would be played, having players from Great Britain facing off against America's best professionals. Fast forward to today, and winning a PGA event could win you $4.5 million, an incredible increase from the four-figure prize pool being played for only 100 years earlier. But that money wasn't enough for some, and although the PGA had incredibly strong roots and history, it could be argued that the game's competitive format had become stale. Golf, to anyone who has never played it, can often be seen as boring, because you can't truly appreciate the skill it takes to drive a ball 300 yards onto a green, and that presented a great opportunity for the Saudi-backed golfing organisation Live Golf. With tournaments ranging from classic individual formats to group competitions, it brought a new sense of innovation and a fresh look to golf that many had craved. Group play gave audiences a team to root for, rather than just an individual, and allowed for more storylines to emerge and get behind. And with the Saudi-backed giant having money to burn, at times offering $50 million prize pools for single tournaments, it allowed them to offer professionals incredible amounts of money to come over to their organisation. And the PGA wasn't happy about this, because it would take some of their top pros away from competing in their tournaments. And this conclusion was reinforced by the PGA. Golf now had a divide. Some players took the moral high ground and did not take the money, and some took the life-changing amounts that Live was offering, sometimes hundreds of millions of pounds, and that was before they even played any tournaments. Fast forward to 2023, however, and the PGA would shock the world, announcing that they intended to merge with the Saudi-backed league so that the sport could once again have tournaments with all of the top players included. This, of course, left some of the PGA players livid. They stayed loyal to the PGA and missed out on potentially hundreds of millions of pounds in the process. Money that could have funded the livelihoods of their families for generations to come. However, it was revealed in a leaked memo to players from Jay Monahan that the PGA would be setting up a compensation scheme for non-LIV golfers who stayed loyal to the PGA Tour, with names like Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy looking to see payments of $100 million and $50 million respectively. The PGA has also opened its doors slightly to LIV golfers, allowing them to qualify through America's point system and to participate in their majors, once again uniting the best players from across the globe in a single tournament, which is what golf fans ultimately want, and hopefully they'll continue to see it in the future. But enough about the history, let's talk about the equipment. One of the aspects of golf that has seen the most improvement. Let's start talking about balls. Before the dimpled white ball that you know from today, they used hardwood, leather bags stuffed with feathers, and even dried sap called the gutty golf ball, which was heated and shaped. As you can imagine, balls stuffed with feathers didn't last very long. It was then that the rubber golf ball was invented in 1898, a solid rubber core wrapped in high-tension rubber threads. These balls eventually phased out the gutty balls entirely, but it still took a number of years of innovation for players to be happy with the rubber balls. The patterning on the outside, as well as the material used, would see many iterations over the years, until they finally reached the dimpled ball that we know today. But now you know everything about the balls, let's move on to the clubs. The first ever golf clubs were carved by the golfers themselves out of wood, but golf clubs had very different names in comparison to today. You had the long noses for driving, grasped drivers for medium range, spoons for short shots, niblicks similar to wedges, and a putting cleek. The clubs had to remain as wood for a long time. They were playing with feather-filled golf balls after all. Club makers would continue to experiment with the club face, using leather, metal, and other materials to make the clubs more durable and increase distance. And in 1908, the first breakthrough was made, putting grooves into the club face to create backspin and generate more distance. Companies would continue to innovate, and it was only in 1925 that club shafts were all made out of metal. In 1931, they banned concave-faced wedges, and that left us with the straight-faced modern sand wedge that we have today. Professional golfers used to carry 20 to 30 clubs in their bag, until 1939, the golf governing body brought in the 14 club rule. The introduction of metal clubs made this much easier, with each having a more specific role in a player's game. World War II sadly halted the innovation of golf clubs for several decades, until in the 1960s it became present again. Companies would experiment with fiberglass shafts, which inevitably failed, as well as finding casting methods for club heads that made clubs more affordable and easier to create. In 1970, putters began to be innovated with the ping putter, which had more weight in the heel and toe, which helped golfers putt straighter. In 1973, the graphite shaft was introduced, which produced more rigidity, lightness, and increased strength over the steel shaft. TaylorMade was the first company to produce metal club-headed woods, but it wasn't until 1991 that this was popularized among the masses, when Callaway introduced the Big Bertha club in 1991, a driver that had an oversized metal club head, and more similar to the club heads that you see today. Golf clubs are innovated every year by the biggest brands in the sport, whether it's the shaft, the angle of the head, the shape of the head, the forgiveness on shots, and so much more, and that innovation won't ever stop. But now for the final section of golf equipment. The fashion, probably the most noticeable change so far. In the early days, men were typically seen sporting tailored coats, collared shirts, and knee-high socks. In the 1920s, golf fashion would become much closer to the modern day, influenced by iconic American golfer Bobby Jones, wider leg trousers, loose-fitting shirts, and the sleeveless jumpers. Finally, a more casual approach. And then in 1970, everything would change. With colourful shirts, colourful trousers, and outlandish shoes, golfers would start to embrace individuality, breaking the norms of the sport. In the 1980s and 1990s, known as the technological era, golfers would opt for performance-driven fabrics that would inspire golf clothing that we wear today. Golf apparel brands took off, and comfort, flexibility, and breathability were all a top priority over fashion. Now on to the final section of the video, the golfers. We all know Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, but what about the older generations who pushed the sport forward to what we know today? First off, we have Harry Vardon, a great golfer in the late 1800s, with the record for the most open wins, 6 in total. But it wasn't his golf that he was remembered for, but rather the grip that he used to hold his golf clubs. Known as the Vardon grip or the overlapping grip, it is the most used grip used today by professional golfers. Walter Hagen, born in 1892, started off as a caddy at the age of 9. He'd go on to win 11 major championships and participate in the Ryder Cup on 6 different occasions. In the early 1900s, golf was seen as a ridiculous sport, but Walter helped to shift that narrative. He dressed stylishly and lived extravagantly. Oozing self-confidence, he gave golf a new face for that era, no longer something to be looked down upon. Golf was a gentleman's game, and he demanded to be seen as a gentleman. But next we have Ben Hogan. Ben unfortunately almost died in a horrific car accident. Being written off from playing the sport ever again, he'd eventually come back and be better than ever before. His golf swing was a thing of beauty, idolized famously by Nick Faldo, and that same swing still influences golfers today. Next on the list we have Arnold Palmer, widely regarded as one of the most charismatic players in the sport's history and nicknamed the King. Dating back to 1955, he won numerous events on the PGA Tour and was the first superstar of the sport's television age. He was one of the most marketable athletes ever and pushed the game forward to new audiences who realized that you could be both cool and play golf. Next is debatably the greatest golfer of all time, depending of course on who you ask, Jack Nicklaus. A debate that will probably never be decided. With Tiger Woods coming onto the tail end of his career and Jack being retired for many years, he is the golfer with the most majors of all time, winning 18 in total, 3 more than Tiger Woods. He even came second place in 19 majors as well. His playing days focused on major events, but he won 117 professional golf tournaments in his career. Since his retirement, he has played a hand in designing over 400 modern golf courses across the globe, and remains a loved figure within the golf sporting world, now aged 84. Next, we have the other golfer in the debate for the GOAT label, and that's Tiger Woods. Not only being an advocate for diversity and pushing the game outside of the boundaries that it once fell into, but also making the masses take the sport much more seriously on a professional level. Previously known as a casual game, his ice-cold approach to competition and focus on winning everything made him an unstoppable force since he won his first Masters famously in 1997. He has broken a countless amount of records, and even pushed some golf courses to Tiger-proof their layouts, because he made them seem too easy. He normalized putting on size and working on strength to hit the ball further, and pushed physicality in the game to new heights, forcing his rivals to follow suit to attempt to compete with him. He has been faced with several scandals, and has made a series of mistakes throughout his career, but that hasn't stopped him from winning 15 majors, most famously winning his last major in 2019 at the age of 43. Whilst fighting against his body and on heavy pain medication due to the issues with his back and his legs. Since then, he has even suffered from a horrific car accident in 2021 that severely injured his legs and shattered his ankle. Everyone thought he'd never come back, but now at age 48, he is still playing, making cuts, and showing the world why he's one of the all-time greats of the sport. And the final name on the list is Rory McIlroy, an active Northern Irish golfer who has stood atop the golf player rankings as number 1 on multiple occasions. He's a well-spoken and charismatic player who has always put the best interests of the sport above his own. The 4-time major champion has been a massive advocate for keeping golf's integrity, which has been threatened by new organizations like Live Golf, trying to divide the industry and making it so top competitions don't contain all of the top talent. He has turned down several offers from Live, most recently a reported $850 million move. He continues to stand his ground against the message that the sport can't be purchased. He wants golf to be about competing against the best, rather than playing for a payday. Even after the PGA announced this merger, rendering his efforts to keep the game together, he still remains loyal to the oldest brand in golf.